Welcome to Tech Talk with IoT and Automation. I'm your host, Jordan Dieterle. Join us as we dive into the world of automation and manufacturing, bringing you expert insights from industrial professionals and business leaders. Whether you're a business owner, engineer, or simply passionate about technology, this podcast is your go-to source for the latest trends and innovations in the field. Hey everybody, welcome to Tech Talk with IoT. I'm your host, Jordan Dieterle. Today here I have a guest, Charles Johnson. I'm looking forward to talking about It's a Controls Problem. Charles, how are you?
I'm doing well. It is, let's see, what does my watch say? It is sunny and here, 76 in Charleston. So doing pretty good. Doing pretty good.
That's good. Yeah. I think it's like 74, but smoky here. I don't know if you've kind of seen what's going on in the Pickens area, but we have a huge wildfire going on. About last I read, it was 6,100 acres. It was 6,100 acres. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had that issue near Myrtle Beach and St. George and all of that going down that way. But there were some places closer to the Charleston area, but not quite. Like I don't think I saw any. I don't think I saw any smoke, but I heard about it.
Yeah.
But of course, I wanted to grill out that day, and my nephew said you can't do it because there's there's something out from the governor. I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then he showed me the news. I'm like, "Oh, I guess I should stay up with the current events more." So yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like a huge deal right now and going on. But yeah, overall, I mean it's still good, it's still nice, and I'm kind of enjoying the 7-degree weather right now. But yeah, so overall, man, I wanted to kind of get into, tell me about your background. What, I'm fathomed by, you're creating a podcast around It's a Controls Problem. That's exciting to me because, I was a controls engineer. So I want to kind of know what's your background and what is, that spark to create something, it's a controls problem and make it, a bigger thing, because I mean, that really sparked my interest. And I'm like, that's the reason, hey, you're a guest. So I want to kind of hear your background on, what sparked you to create that and, your overall.
Sure. So I've been in the controls industry for over 24 years. My dad, he was when he was when he was younger, he worked for a control. Well, actually, he started taking out the trash at a controls company that was right around the corner from where he lived. And then when he turned 18, the company was like, "Hey, what do you want to do for a living?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know." And they're like, "Well, come work here." And he said, "Okay." So he started out as a technician and then eventually became like the warehouse manager of it. It was for Barbara Coleman. So back at that point, it was all Network 8000, host and signal. And so, I would go around the office when I was a kid, picking up some things, not too much, but more after that was, I always had that kind of interest in it, and it really, like once I turned 18, it was like, all right, well, I guess, I guess we're doing this. And so, yeah, I've been in it I've been in it since, I guess 2001. Um, I started out just cutting my teeth on all things Network 8000. Then eventually, when they combined with CB, then Inventus, I got a hold of the LAN side for the IA series stuff. And then we picked up a line called Reliable Controls at this particular company I started to work for. And then I actually had to do an integration between a web control front end system, which I had never seen before, and and reliable. And so that really kind of sparked my interest in learning what else was out there. And
Hmm.
so I then kind of went on this mission to learn and become certified in as many controls products as I could. The point
Yep.
was that as I kind of started venturing out there, I didn't care what was in front of me, just the fact that I could program it. And so that that allowed me to kind of go through and do some contracting as well, programming and whatnot. Um, and then I got back into like the actual company sector instead of being an independent contractor. I got in with Distech and worked with some people who deal with Distech for about 12 years. And then I also learned, I also got Honeywell certified during that point in time. But then after my relationship with that company ended, which ended on good terms, where I'm still good friends with them, and they're actually very popular in South Carolina and North Carolina. Um, and
Yep.
then I got with Lynxspring, and Lynxspring said, "Well, hey Charles, we have this training position, but you could do a lot for the company." And so I've been their Niagara certified trainer, and yeah. But how the podcast came about was, it's always a controls problem. Doesn't matter what it is; it's a controls problem.
Yep.
Dealing, obviously being working in the field, seeing how that happened. My friend and I were just like, you know what? Let's just do a podcast. Let's just kind of just talk about stuff. And so I've always had this vision. Controls has always been trial baptism by fire,
Hmm.
and that's not like right or wrong. That's kind of how we all learned. And you have a lot of the dinosaurs, and I consider myself a dinosaur in the field, even though I'm only 42. It's really tough to get the older people to want to mentor you. And so we have this younger crowd that's coming in, and they don't know anything. They are smarter on the computer side, so they understand the how, but they really don't understand the why. And so that no one's explaining the why portion to them. And so my whole goal now is to just educate the world on all things controls. It doesn't matter a specific product, regardless of whether it's TAC, regardless, or even at that point, whether you're using EcoStructure or Continuum, from Delta to Apogee. It doesn't matter. The point is, I just want to teach about controls specifically, and this
Hmm.
podcast is here to enlighten about even things that right now are currently hot topics. And then we will circle back into kind of the foundations of things. So, like we've been talking about, like AI or what
Hmm.
open systems actually entail. And then at that point, we're talking about continuing education, and we actually just finished a recording of, you're a technician and you're going out in the field. What are you expecting to be in day one
Yeah.
of a job site? So we're gonna be unpacking that as well. But then we're gonna be talking about things like sales estimation, and then even development, like module development or other kinds of development on like the UX and UI side. And so it's going to encapsulate a lot, and hopefully, people will continue to enjoy what we're doing. Um,
Yeah.
but why the name? It's a controls problem because it's always a controls problem. Doesn't really matter what it is. The fan, wires are burnt. Well, it's a controls problem. Okay. Well, the door, it won't close. It's a controls problem. Don't know how we got involved with that, but we controls gets blamed for everything. And so even like
Yes,
when
we
you
do.
go yeah, when you go to a job site, doesn't matter, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so that's why the motto, we do precision guesswork based upon unreliable data given to us by those of questionable knowledge, right? Like
Love that.
that's always no matter what, it's always going to happen that way.
It is. It is. I've been there so many times. So many times. It's like, really? They say I'm here playing a guessing game, when in reality is say it would be it could be a mechanical problem. And it's blatant obvious. It's
Hmm.
like, hey, you can see the shaft, it's just broke. No, it's still a controls problem.
Hmm.
I'm like, how is that a controls problem? but I'm not afraid to get, hey, let's get my hands dirty. Let's take that motor out. Let's replace it.
Well, I remember specifically there was a plant in there was a building in DC. It was like 12 stories, and like three of the stories were not being renovated. It was retail space, and so there was a condenser loop that was still there. But the rest of the building was being renovated for office spaces. Well,
Mhm.
they put in new cooling towers and all this other stuff. And when I looked at the bypass valve that they put in, I'm like, isn't like doesn't that water just all go down to the condensers on the retail and nothing happens here? And they brought the engineer out. It's like, oh, path of least resistance, blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, I understand what you're saying about that, but I don't think that's going to be the case. So I had to prove a point. And so to prove a point is I just left the valve open. Like, all right, cool, path of least resistance. We should be going to the towers. Great. No, I was at a site where I didn't have cell phone service, and the voicemails got extremely angrier each time. Like, hey Charles, you got to call us back here. Got an issue out at the site here. But hey Charles, you better call me back, right? So then, like, by the time like I finally got out of that secure area and got the call, they were like, Charles, we're here on site. We're checking strainers. The heat exchanger could be clogged. The tower's been sucked dry. Blah blah. I'm like, did you close the bypass valve? And they're like, well, I'm like, I've been telling them that they need to close the bypass valve. So I opened the bypass valve to make sure that I'm surprised that you guys didn't call me earlier. They're like, well, we called you all day. I'm like, well, no one looked at the graphic to see that the valve was overridden. Like no one looked at the valve. They were checking everything else. And so finally that got through the engineer's head, like, oh, we need to do a redesign. Yeah, you need to do a redesign. We told you that, like, in the very beginning. And now I've had to prove my point here to do it. And I hate when I have to prove points like that, but sometimes it has to happen in order to, and luckily it's during the construction portion and not obviously, in the actual, like, tenants are there and this is what's happening. So I think in those cases, like, all right, you know what? No harm, no foul, but you know, it got the redesign what it needed.
Yeah, yeah. So you're saying like even so you're saying it could be a controls problem, but like I'm hearing you say, it's a 12-story building. To me, I mean, my background's mostly, general industry and,
Hmm.
automotive controls. They say like it's been a lot of Allen Bradley, Fanuc is say doing,
Hmm.
280 robot cells for, an automated, line for
Yeah.
a automotive maker, tier one, any of the big OEMs. Um, but I'm hearing you, explain some of these other scenarios, and it sounds like your background is very diverse to where like you could be at a chemical plant tomorrow, or you could have been in a chemical plant tomorrow. You could be, in Minnesota training. you
Yeah.
could be, you could be here or go to New York because they say there's this. So it sounds like it's very diverse, and there's a wide range of different platforms that you've trained on to gain that experience and knowledge. And now it's just like, hey, you're looking to basically utilize, Lynxspring's, uh, like platform, and they're and trying to basically train and help develop younger talent to grow, as well as you building out your podcast. Is that kind of what you're looking to do?
Yeah, so with Lynxspring, their claim to fame in the controls world is they were the first Niagara OEM to create a controller outside of Tritium,
Okay.
and so they used to work with a lot of manufacturers, like even like Aon, Greenheck, Valent, all those kinds, and and even we've taken over PLCs. With that as well, and so our solution can not only be for just straight building automation, but people have used it at the industrial level as well. But like when
Mhm.
you're even getting like PLCs, like obviously like integration, right? So like we can talk about whether or not you're going through OPC or whether you want to do anything through Modbus or anything like that. So you know
Yep.
we may not necessarily install in a lot of PLCs, but we're definitely doing a fair amount of integration with that stuff as well. But
Yep.
working in plants even like such as like Michelin and stuff like that, like you know I've put controls in, in an array of those, even hydrogen facilities.
Yeah.
It's a lot that it's a lot that we've done from, and not just we as a whole, but like, even like MTU Americas, doing stuff there over in Graniteville, where they make they make Rolls Royce engines, but not really for cars, more for larger equipment. But I mean, those facilities still need controls as well to keep everything going.
Yeah. And does the IoT like 4.0 I guess realm and push is that like a big part of like what you guys are like deploying?
We do. We do have a solution that we are applying there. It's called E2E, or Edge to Enterprise, as we call it. And so, what we can do is we can pull data from wherever that we need, and put it to give unique analytics and dashboards for the customer to make whatever informed decisions.
Mm.
IoT really, as far as the cloud, or even
Yep.
beyond that, that is like that, obviously those are not only just buzzwords, but those are things that people are trying to accomplish. So like, they're working with like AWS or Azure, or this, that,
Yep.
and trying to figure out the best solution to to put that data in. And like, even
Mm.
like when you're getting into like even like let's say like AI, where you've got different things like some people use digital twinning, or some people would just go from a database specifically and just pump that in there, and monitor the data in real time. It doesn't matter what the data is underneath. Customers want something from a a cloud based solution that will allow them to get their data under one front end, regardless of what the front end is. They want it.
Yeah. Yeah, they basically want to see that data up on the screen and tell them that this is my problem, or hey, why is it down, or they can make a phone call to basically solve the problem very quickly. I mean, that's what my experience has always been of I want, they want the data in front of them to basically
Mhm.
give them answers at a very quick response rate. So then that they can, basically make a critical, I guess, critical action, or, find a solution for that problem, or even giving them, hey, we're producing this, so they can estimate some numbers for the week, the month, etc. I think
Mhm.
that that's like, been like a lot of the automation 4.0, the
Mhm.
SCADA systems and the internet, like the internet of all things, right? That's been like and I agree with you. It's big buzzwords, but hey, it gets, everybody moving. Hey, I want to try it. I want to like, let me do this. Like it's always interesting when, I'm collecting, when I was collecting data from all these cells and they're like, well, what are you doing with that? And I'm like, well, it's super simple. It's just, I'm just moving it here and displaying it there. And
Mhm.
they're like, oh, that's it. Yeah, it's not really that hard, but sometimes, there's, well, it's on a screen.
Yeah.
So,
Well, hey, you want to see those meters. You want to see the dashboards. You want to know how many kW per ton, or BT. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, they want to see it. Like, they want to see they want to see all the flash. And so like, yeah, like,
yep.
even from industrial side, right? So let's say you're in an automotive you're an automotive facility, and one of the machines that is helping welding like the body together, all of a sudden that breaks down. Well, what if you had analytics that could tell you, hey, maybe you should have you should have serviced that particular piece of equipment 15 days before you actually needed to do it. Like, having that kind of predictive maintenance or predictive analysis is vital now, because that saves downtime. Like, okay,
Yeah.
cool, we can, in the off peak hours, we can go ahead and shut this portion down, get something else in here for now while we're servicing this. And at that point, the loss of production is extremely minimal in
Yep.
comparison to the catastrophic millions of dollars that could just be wasted in hours, just because
Yes.
something isn't being put on the line.
Yeah, yeah, you're basically like the predictive or like preventative maintenance idea, and with preparing that is it's a huge time saver for the company overall. So like when you're installing stuff like that, and I guess like what I've always seen is like they have the sensor, like you place a sensor and it just sits on, it's a magnetic sensor and it basically just sits on the motor and it's just tracking vibration, tracking, specific metrics of a motor or anything that, they need to track that's critical for their problem. And then you're basically just monitoring it. And like you said, they say, hey, we need to schedule this downtime. I know for a fact to say like there's a couple lumber companies that I've visited and they're like, yeah, we schedule, no matter what, we are down for 4 days and they schedule 4 days and they do all their PMs and they bring in a bunch of different contractors, but it keeps them up and running
Mhm.
for, that 26 day cycle that they have. And
Yeah.
it's very productive. And I think that that's a lot of plants. A lot of plants are kind of implementing that. And I think that goes along with, that automation 4.0 and trying to
Mhm.
accelerate that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. Like when you're in, regardless of what automation, whether you're in industrial automation or building automation, a lot of the principles are the same, and the customers have really the same outcome. It's just it's just a it just is dependent upon scale and your piece of equipment versus my piece of equipment, right? Like
Yep.
it all is the same. So like if as long as you understand control fundamentals, regardless from a building automation or industrial automation perspective, right? Like it can bounce in between.
Yes. Yes. I agree. So like when you're I guess, for instance, like when you're analyzing a problem, like, you have 20 plus years of experience, you know, for the listeners and like, the younger technicians that are kind of watching this podcast. And that seems to be the audience that I, draw to a lot is say they want to, hear, hey, what was, some of your stories that, what happened to you? How do you analyze, a problem from like start to finish?
So the first thing that I do is I literally go back to the basics. I don't think of anything. I don't go of anything too complex immediately. The first thing I want to do is, all right. Let's knowing seeing what the issue is. Let's go with the basics. Let's all right. Let's troubleshoot. Do we have bad wires? Nope. All right. Tone the wire out. That part's good. Okay. Do we have bad relays? Okay. No relay. Relay's fine here. Okay. Do we have a bad output on the on the actual controller itself? Right. Like so really going taking the basics that you know and that you've been taught is always something, and I draw it out. As a matter of fact, like for example, I always keep a highlighter, and
Yep.
so when I draw out on a piece of paper and a pen, and I have some kind of relay, well, if I know I've touched that wire, I highlight it, knowing that I've
Yeah.
touched it and I know that portion is good. So then once I break it down systematically, then after I've troubleshot all that, okay, what else now do I can think of, and then I go with the next level and the next level. I don't it's easy to go in like the 100,000 foot view, but
Yep.
really you need to start with like the 1 foot view,
Yeah.
and then move on forward and forward. And so a lot of people will try the very top, but then they get lost in the details, and all of a sudden, like, it could have been just something so basic. An example of that was a place called Doctor's Hospital in Maryland,
Hmm.
and it was a weird call. I don't know if I have a connection issue. Okay, all right, we're back. You paused for a moment. I don't know if that was me or you.
Yeah. We're
Um,
good.
but so Doctor's Hospital got a call and said, "Hey, Charles, they were testing the fire alarm, they were testing the fire alarm, and the unit shut down and wouldn't go back up." I'm like, "Okay, I've never even heard of this
Mhm.
place, but fine. I guess they chose the first HVAC person they had. We weren't even part of we don't even know who was servicing the system, and as a matter of fact, it was pneumatics.
Oh,
So it's like,
okay.
okay, so in my head as I'm driving down to this place, I'm like, okay, well, if they tested the fire alarm, obviously some smoke dampers closed and didn't open back up. Like that in my head, I'm instantly looking at smoke dampers to do whatever.
Yep.
So we're going around and going through smoke damper and so I'm like, man, like all these are open. I don't understand. I'm like, how that could have shut down. And come to find
Mhm.
out, it wasn't even that. The guy was like, yeah, no, it came back up just fine after that, but after I replaced the filter, that's when I found then that the unit stopped. It wouldn't turn back on. I'm like, wait a minute, a filter, not smoke dampers, right? So like in my head, I'm thinking, all right, there's smoke damper closed, right? That's
Yes.
the first thing they said. And then probably what I should have asked him beforehand was, hey, can you, and that was the thing where it's like, I was looking for the unicorn at first, but then like
Mhm.
once he said what actually happened, I spent hours troubleshooting fire dampers. Like the hospital was like 8 floors.
Oh,
And
man.
so, yeah, so I'm just like, I
Up
don't,
and down, up
yeah,
and
up and
down.
down. And so once he did that, I'm like, oh, okay. We know that a piece of pneumatic tubing just fell off at the unit and went ahead and just, put it back on and got the unit up and running again. And it was just fine. And so really there is, regardless of what you hear, go and ask the customer what's wrong. Right, because you may get a different story than what someone else is, and actually that happens a lot in our technical support, where we'll see it, we'll see a ticket come in, and I actually support technical support. Like, so I'm typically there if they can't figure it out, they normally bring me in, and I'm
Mm.
just kind of doing other things. But like they'll talk about it, and then like I talk to the customer like, hey, what are you experiencing? And then all of a sudden I get a different story than what they even told the original guys. I'm like, oh, well, then it's just this, and this is, and this is where we end our story because it was a quick fix. And I go and tell the support player, they're like, yeah, that's not what they told us. I'm like, oh no, I believe you, and I could see the responses in your tickets where, this happened. And so, any advice, just literally start with the basics, find out what it is, talk to the customer, find out what they are experiencing, not like what you heard from dispatch. Go in, talk to the customer, and then from there, start with the basics. Like, okay, cool. Maybe they take you to the SCADA system and show you the graphic there and show you that, show
Yeah.
you something. And whether or not it's a graphic issue, I've gotten that too, where I had chiller sensors that were backwards, and they wouldn't show me the graphics at first. So like they immediately took me to the plant, and like I couldn't get access to the system because like they kind of had things locked down. I'm like, okay, well, it's on this and this is on this, and they're like, well, no, on the graphic here. I'm like, okay, so the points are, so they literally on the graphic, like the wired, it was correct, but literally on the graphic itself, the chill water supply and return were backwards. And I'm like, if you had just taken me to the graphic in the first place, I could have just spent literally 2 minutes just swap and be
Yeah.
done. And so,
That's pretty rough.
it's some of those where like even at Michelin in Greenville, there was a what building was it? Not 201. There's one right next to 201. I think that's like building like, I don't know if that's called the tire building or not. Um, I don't know if it's building 100. I don't know what's
Yeah,
I don't
there's 101, then there's 201, then
yeah,
there's 100. Yeah, I know what you're talking about,
yeah,
though. I
if
know
you
where you're at.
yeah, like so like if you go out the back of 200 or 201, like there's like it looks like you're in the quad. And so it's like that building off to the it's the building off to the left. And so we had an issue where they tried to get us involved, and we're like, well, we're not on the industrial side, but we'll take a look. And we realized like a fuse was blown, like after just
Mhm.
kind of troubleshooting. Like, well, I don't have that fuse, you're gonna have to go and
Yeah,
find that fuse to replace it. And I'm like, okay,
yeah.
well, can I go back to doing what I'm doing now? And yeah,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Like so they'll just go grab you. It doesn't matter. Like they will
Mhm.
they will have
It's
like
your problem. Solve
yeah,
it.
yeah. I'm like, that's not, you know what? Okay, fine. I'll go ahead and take a look. Like I had someone that had my cell phone and called me about about their voice over IP phone, and I'm like, I'm not okay. Did you try did you try turning it on and turning it off again? Like unplug it from the back. Like, no, not the cable. Unplug the power adapter to the phone. Oh,
Mhm.
hey, that worked. My network's back up. Thank you. Okay, I don't like
It's like
free
IT help
service.
desk.
Yeah. Well, like some people will think like, "Hey, are you an IT?" No, that's
No.
not what I said. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
Like we like in controls period, like we work on all sorts of things. You have to learn like the automotive side, where you have to understand how the pieces of equipment that are putting that are manufacturing together. Then you have to understand the electrical side, because if you have to wire it up, you don't want to kill yourself.
Yep.
You don't want to cause any injury to yourself or anyone. And then at that point, even from a networking side, right? Like, you have to understand like how it all gets networked together. You have to understand how the SCADA system works. Are you doing OPC? Are you not doing OPC? Right? Like, what other buses are you working with? Are you working with like Profibus, or other things like that too? Are you just doing just straight Modbus? And then even like programming doesn't matter, right? Because like you're using a lot of PLC logic, right? So, well,
Yep.
understanding how PLC logic works, like once you understand that where all the lines go with, and like and reading ladder logic, I think like when you're just like drawing stuff out, I draw a lot on using ladder logic. And so
Yep.
like PLC programming just becomes easier that way. Like, oh yeah, I've drawn that out, I know exactly how to add that here, and
Yep.
and uh,
Oh, yeah,
and get
I
it
try it
going.
all
So
the time.
yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I start. I'll sit there and, hey, start with the basics. Like,
Uh-huh.
hey, I'll look at the code and, kind of go through it. But I mean, it's kind of funny. I had a problem just this week, right? And I'm there working on, working on a cell. And I'm typically not in the field as much anymore, but I mean, I go here and there and say whenever it's needed, and I help out wherever it's needed. But for this specific problem, I was like, hey, I'm gonna finish this project. Let's get it done. And we went there, and it's lining up some light curtains, and I did a bunch of different other stuff for the customer, lining up the light curtains, lined up one, great, totally fine. All right, let's get the next set. Went to go get the next set, wouldn't line up. Spent 2 hours, just kept going, and then next thing you know, I'm 4 hours in, and I'm like, what is going on? So I'm like, all right, let me call the guy that put them in. Like see what happened. Call him. Yeah. Okay, well, maybe you got a faulted wire, and it was they're Allen Bradley light curtains, and it's UM, and I think it's UO, and they're different. Like, one's like the transmitter, one's the emitter. And I'm like, okay, let me pull it out, right? Let me check it. And I mean, obviously, so I pulled it out and I moved it over to the other one. I'm like, oh, it don't work. Oh, crap. I'm like, well, I got a bad, card here. Like, that'll work. Well, then I'm like, oh, I just bumped the light curtain. It works now. So, and it's just, one of those things. I'm like so frustrated. I'm like, how is that possible? And I'm like, that one works. And I'm like, all right, let's just, you know what? Let's just go back to the basics. I went and grabbed the manual. I sat there and read, 68 pages in, and I have another guy. I brought another guy with me the next day, read 68 pages in, and I probably could have just sat down and read the manual, at night or something like that. No, I,
Hmm.
I waited till the day of, and read the manual, got to page 67. And I said, wait, we have blocking in here. We didn't set it. And it was literally just to take my finger, put it over to the light for 10 seconds, pull it off for 2, put it over for 5, and then wait
And
and
then
let
it
the
worked.
let the light curtain do its thing. Well, we were doing that, but the problem was is as soon as what we would do is we'd let it do it, and we'd jump in it. And it would mess up the sequence. So we turned around and we're like, okay, well, when we watched this YouTube, he's like, "Oh yeah, don't listen to the manual. The manual's wrong." I'm like, "But what?" So when we're doing this, he's like, "Yeah, just let it do its thing. Don't touch it." Okay, we did it, and it came right on. I think when we added it all up, we were 13 hours into just 2 light curtains. And I was so frustrated. I mean, luckily I mean, obviously the line wasn't like immediate need. It was like, an integration thing, but it's like, hey, like, we're here. Like, we could have been done in 2 days. Instead, we added a whole extra day to get this done. And I'm like, oh, this is frustrating. But yeah, you run into those type of problems, and I probably could have just went to the original source, probably asked the guy and said, hey, well, send me the manual. you know, and started from here. But I took, this guy's advice. Well, it's probably that. It's probably this. And we just started going off on a path. And I'm like, all right, we got to take a step back because it worked over here. So
Well,
yeah, it's kind of
like
frustrating.
ABB, when the ACH 550s first came out, and they had the Eclipse bypass at the bottom.
Mhm.
Um, one of the big things that would happen with that Eclipse bypass was that Modbus was talking between the bypass and the drive, and you couldn't change that, and you had to change all the communication profiles in the bypass itself. Well, we were trying to integrate we were trying to talk Modbus to the drive, period, but then we were actually using hardwire relays to control the start stop, and then we were using an AO for the speed. Well, it
Mhm.
wouldn't work. And
Yep.
so, we called support finally because, like, we read the manual. That was fine. They're like, "Oh yeah, what profile are you using?" Well, we are HVAC, so we're using the HVAC profile. Oh yeah, you can't use that one. What? Why not? Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's bad. We're working on a firmware fix. These drives are
Okay.
like new. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But what I'm saying is that there's no note here saying don't, you know, switch the profile needs to switch in order for it to do what you need to do. And I'm like, how how many times do you get calls for this? Like, without the documentation being right, what do you have? Do you have a shot of this? Like, did someone else just like, let's just change the profile on the drive? Oh, that works. Great. And then talk to ABB about it, right? Like how's that
Yeah.
not get disseminated? I mean, obviously that was like 2007 or
It's
2008. So
crazy.
I mean, fixed a long time ago, but still, like, even during that time, you're just like, why?
Yeah,
So
it's like one of those things like you just it comes with experience, and that's, I definitely recommend like what you said, start with the basics,
mhm.
work your way down. It helps
Yep.
overall for sure. Um, well, yeah, no. So overall, I think you've kind of shared, a broad, range of like what you've completed and your interest is saying. It sounds like your interest in controls, to say, was fueled by your father. We have that interest or that same thing that happened to us. To say my father was he was a lineman and an electrician, and I was just like, hey, that's what I want to do. And
hmm
it just kind of in mine, I expanded mine into, industrial automation. But it's a yours is here's HVAC, building
hmm
automation, it's a chemical plants, it's a I mean, and you've still had that experience probably in the automotive area because I mean, I've heard you talk about Michelin, you've been in the plant in Michelin,
hmm
you know what that is. But it at the end of it, it still becomes a controls problem. Even if
Yep.
it's a motor, even if it's a
hmm
HVAC not working, a thermostat, a phone.
Yep. That's
It's
right.
always
Doesn't
a control.
doesn't matter. Yep.
So, no, that's awesome. So yeah, Charles, to say, I wanted to also, hey, how do people reach you? Especially, if they wanted to get on to your podcast, it's a controls problem. I have a wide network that I like to share, and I'm always looking for, hey, how can I help? Uh, so how can they reach you? Is saying you can give them your LinkedIn. They say whichever you prefer.
Yeah, I mean, you could always follow me on LinkedIn. Obviously, it's more. I talk more about using the Niagara framework and whatnot.
Mm,
But I mean, the Niagara framework can be used for a lot, not just HVAC. It's we
mm.
see it in EV charging stations, and
Yep.
people are using it everywhere. So it doesn't matter that part. But yeah, they can follow me on LinkedIn. That's the biggest one there. We don't have like an email yet or anything like that for it's a controls problem. But they can also reach me my name at lynxspring.com as well. And we can absolutely get that going. And if there are topics that people want that want us to talk about, we certainly will always hit it. Now, much like you, like, we have a schedule that we put out so we can put it in the docket. And but if there's enough need for it to hear it, then absolutely we'll put it out. Like, if it's just one person, then we'll weigh out like, okay, well, one person's asked about it so far, but like maybe we'll just put out a poll like, hey,
Mhm.
someone suggested this. What do you all think? Oh, that's a great idea. Like, okay, great. Well, then maybe we'll talk about that more because like there are drivers for like Allen Bradley and Rockwell PLCs,
Yep.
that Tritium can use. I mean that you can use in the Niagara front end in order to integrate, or if it's just straight Modbus, you can talk Modbus as well. So
Yep.
or it doesn't matter, OPC, whatever. And guess what? Being a developer, if we don't have something, you can make it. That's the
Yes.
that's the beauty of that as well.
Yep. Yeah, no, totally agree. Well, hey, I appreciate it. And I say, hey, for the listeners, I say, please reach out to Charles, connect with him on LinkedIn. And I appreciate you guys listening. I'm your host, Jordan Dieterle, and this is Tech Talk with Irony Automated. Have
All
a good
right.
one.
Have a great one.